can join the meeting. Did y'all get in the meeting?
Yeah.
Payments. And we have, and I know the city auditor over the years has dug into it, and we dug into it, and we found that most of the items have adequate internal controls. They are approved at a departmental level to be submitted to accounts payable. And this is the way the system allows you to take feeds from other systems and actually create payments from it. So a lot of these payments are maybe would be, Sheila might have told me, but they might be to refund money to people that were in the city instead of citing them as a vendor. They would go through this category, and it's been a long-term finding even before we were here. But I know that this committee has asked us to make sure to go through and look at that and get a better detail on it. Through our examination, I felt comfortable that we did not have to report a finding from that.
Right. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's not all, there's more.
So, and we've had, in the past, we've had findings over the reconciliation of the cash accounts. So this year we were able, we're going to take that out of the findings that you report and put it into a management letter. For one, the only reason we're keeping the management letter is just due to the internal controls so that they're reconciled timely. And then there was 1 month that we tested that was actually the review of the reconciliation was, I think it was 15 days late. So we didn't feel like that warranted the finding of the level that we had at. So we feel like they have remedied that internal control too, and are reconciling cash on a timely basis and having the adequate review of those reconciliations.
Right. More good news.
Yes, more work to do.
So we did, when we issue the final yellow book report with a single audit, there will be one finding in there that came in part of the process. And it's a really unique situation, and it's a strange finding because it deals with the city has issued debt to make an additional contribution over to the pension. And in our government accounting world, financial reporting for that gets to be a little tricky. I don't want to lose everybody, so if you have questions. So basically, when they issued the debt, the proceed for that came from that debt was actually contributed over to the pension. That was recorded correctly. On the employer side of the books, so the pension, the employers the numbers that come into the employer's side of the books are on a year lag due to the actuarial valuations and things that GASB allows for a 1-year lag. So in that 1-year lag, that means the current year contributions by the employer are called deferred outflow of resources. The city recorded them as part of the ACFR as a contribution in that current year. And it should have been a deferral, which it takes it from the income statement to the balance sheet. The financial reporting nuance, it doesn't change any of the governmental funds. It is the government-wide funds, but it was for a significant dollar amount. It was $120 million. So the financial statements that are out on the street are accurate. It doesn't affect the funds, which is where you kind of, the fund accounting is actually where you do more of the operation of the government. So there's no new information here other than the financial reporting for this pension contribution. Contribution is in the pension plan. It was recognized as revenue in the pension plan as a contribution. So the pension plan, there was no issues with that. I don't know if there's questions.
So I will just add that this is a learning for us. It's a once in a lifetime transaction. You never expect to do that, but the learning for us is when you have these once in a lifetime, we will be consulting going forward. This is the way we plan to book it and make sure that our auditor doesn't have any issues with that ahead of time.
All right, that's good stance.
And question, is it indeed once in a lifetime, or is it something that's going to happen once in a lifetime every 2 years?
No, the pension is actually once in a lifetime. I mean, you would never expect to close down a pension plan and then move it again. We don't expect that we're going to leave VRS and do it again. But for large transactions that are very unique and extraordinary circumstances, you're right, that can happen once every 2 years. That's why we have to have that go forward plan of, okay, when we hit something that's new, that we haven't done before, that we want an extra set of eyes on. I spent a lot of time hiring CPAs, getting in very qualified folks, but still you need to have someone else look at it, make sure that we've thought of everything. They see a lot more. They work with different localities. And so we just need to have that extra size. So.
CPA on this group, do you have any questions?
No, understand what happened.
Yeah.
Easy that.
All right, so the last thing I want to just cover is obviously we also perform a single audit. We are in the current process of closing that down. That is due to the federal government, 3/31. So it's currently under review. We audited 2 programs this year. We audited state and local fiscal recovery funds and also the Medicaid cluster. As of right now, we have not identified any findings. All the testing is done and everything is just going through. So that's good news that we don't have any federal findings. So with that, if you have any other questions, but that's really what it said.
Great. Sean, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
Very cool.
Safe travels.
Thank you very much.
Okay, audit office initiatives and projects. Yeah.
All right. So first of all, let me say good afternoon to everyone here. Thank you for joining us today. I want to start by saying I'm very proud of my office and my staff as we've recently passed our most recent peer review. It was conducted a couple of weeks ago in February. It was conducted by the county auditor for Harford County, Maryland, as well as the lead senior auditor for the city of Tampa. As you guys may know, a peer review is our most important internal control because it ensures that it really serves as an audit of the auditor, and it reinforces our work. We try to strive for it. It enforces that we are achieving accurate work, objective work, high quality work, and that our independence being, of course, the key that they look at in these peer reviews. I was really pleased to hear from the peer review team that although a lot of my staff, most of my staff are relatively new, almost all of them are really new, they had a strong understanding of the audit process, was the feedback I got, and a strong understanding of the auditing standards. So again, thank you guys for your hard work in preparing and going through that peer review. It gives us a little bit of perspective of what you all go through with us constantly. It put a little perspective back to us about, a little bit how scary it can be and how that process plays out. But again, we did pass that peer review. So on to a staffing update. So I guess the bad news is we currently have 3 vacancies still in our office. That really represents about 20% of our workforce, a little bit more than 20% of our workforce. So it's a significant vacancies that we have in the office that we've had for a lot of the year as we've had, filling and trying, and it's a little bit tough right now The good news is we do have a recruitment out. We have a job posting out. And we're hoping that we're gonna get some new staff members in to fill those vacancies. I was advised today, it's been out for about, I don't know, 2-3 weeks. We have 20 applicants so far, and it hasn't closed yet. So we're hoping that there'll be a good bunch of applicants that we can hire in this batch, at least one, maybe two, if we're lucky, as we go through the hiring process. So we're aiming for April to have somebody new on board and maybe even more. So by the next audit committee, I will hopefully have a new auditor to introduce you all to. Now, over the last quarter, as you all read, we've completed and issued 2 different audit reports. The first one is our non-departmental report on the city's grant awarding and monitoring process. And that will be presented soon by Deputy City Auditor Brett Lewis. The second one is our 3rd report on open recommendations. We do essentially 4-year quarterly reports. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this, but I think it brings high value to the city. And that will be presented by Senior Auditor Leanne Castro shortly. Now, over the last quarter, I think one important thing to note is we spent a considerable amount of time providing help and assistance to the Office of the Inspector General, as well as other investigative support to other offices. We have a really strong working relationship that we've developed with the Office of the Inspector General, and we believe that that's really going to help moving forward as we try to, manage our limited resources in the offices and the different specialties that we have. And that would lead to, our hope is it's going to lead to better oversight and accountability across the city. So with that said, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Deputy City Auditor Brett Lewis for our non-departmental audit presentation.
Thank you. Any questions of the members of the committee? Okay, Brett?
Let me pull up the share.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Riyadh said, this is the non-departmental charitable organization application and oversight process audit. It was conducted as part of our annual audit plan. Full information. So the objective of the audit was to evaluate the non-departmental budget process for compliance and monitoring for the return on investments funding that was allocated. The scope of the audit was the non-departmental budget process for year 2023, the current operating environment for charitable organization contracts that were made to the annual budget process. So this is permitted through state code. The non-departmental grant program really enables the city to work with nonprofits to expand services that are not already offered by the city. A little background on the application and award process. The city puts out requests for applications every year. And they offer information sessions to the grantees so that they can learn and understand the process, what's needed of them to apply. Also in this, the application guidelines, it gives them a due date which the applications are due, as well as it lays out a scoring criteria for which they need to meet to be eligible to receive funding. And then once the applications are received, the first level review is held at the department level. And then those recommendations are forwarded to the city administration to assist in the review there and to lead to the mayor's proposed budget. And then after that, city council amends and adopts it as needed to finalize the actual budget for the city. The overall conclusions is the city's process to award and monitor the non-departmental charitable organizations and grants was inconsistent. It lacked criteria and policies and procedures, as well as each department kind of did their own process. The city's monitoring process was inadequate to determine whether the city is receiving a return on investments. In some instances, we noted that there was no validation. The reports were received without validating the outputs noted within. And then without adequate staffing, training, and monitoring, as well as oversight, the city is exposed to significant risks, including fraudulent use of the grant funds. So the first finding was the application review and award process lacked adequate oversight, controls, and policy procedures to ensure an objective review and award process. So we noted that in the department level review for human services, they followed the 2 criteria of the due date, as well as the score of 75. And in that review process, we noted that even though the criteria was established, that 16 applications totaling approximately 1.1 billion did not meet that criteria, but were recommended to the administration for funding, while some that did meet the criteria were reduced. For the Departments of Public Works and Planning and Development review, we noted that established criteria, they did have the due date, so that's what we used there. And then the city administration's review also did not establish criteria. And two other things we noted in the review process were departments were responsible for making recommendations without knowing the total funding that was available. And there was an inconsistency in the conflict of interest processes. Sometimes the processes were documented, but they weren't maintained. In other cases, the processes or the conflict of interest weren't documented. With findings two, the city code requires each year at least 30 days before the mayor's proposed budget. The CAO should furnish city council with a report detailing the performance of the grantees, as well as and compared to the requirements of that entity's grant contract. City council did receive a presentation. However, we noted it was after the deadline and the timeframe noted, and did not have all the required information. And without this information, it's difficult really for the city council to make budget amendments as necessary. We did note in the final budget, 15 organizations that did not meet the established criteria were awarded approximately $1.4 million in grant contracts, while 34 organizations that did meet the criteria were either reduced or not awarded, totaling approximately $2.3 million. And finding three is regards to monitoring. We noted site visits and desk reviews were not regularly performed. We noted that there was not a process in place to determine who should and shouldn't get a site visit or desk review. So we noted some didn't turn in their required reports, nor was the grantees required to turn in use of funding or explanations as to how the funds were specifically used. In conclusion, we issued 9 recommendations, 4 of which we deemed high priority with 100% concurrence. Some of the recommendations include developing and implementing policies and procedures, collaborating with city council to establish funding mechanism, facilitating regular communication with city council, develop and implement grant monitoring policies and procedures, and assess the staffing needs to handle the process, and then train them as needed.
Okay, so Brett?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Before we go to questions from the committee, does anyone from the city wish to respond or make any sort of comment on this?
Sure. So the non-deed process, it's how do I describe it? It is, been calling it grants, but they're not really grants. According to state law, they're contributions to or donations to charitable organizations. And since this has come up, we are going to stop calling them grants, and we will go according to state law. It will be either considered a sponsorship or donation to a charitable organization. Because when you attach the word grant to it, there is a process, there's an application, there's a review body, there is a whole host of things that go along with it. The administration is not set up to handle grants on this level. The number of organizations over time have grown. I believe they're now spanning over 30 organizations, and really it is 1 or 2 staff members doing it. We do have a legal opinion that says that these are not grants. They don't need to be considered as grants. So that puts a whole new view of this. However, this has also raised a lot of conversation between council, the mayor's office, and administration. So we are looking at a total revamp of this set of funds in this program. And where we'll end up, I don't know yet, but it will be a 2-year process where we're going to overhaul how we distribute these funds. The process has already started in discussions with the mayor's budget. It will move to city council, and I'm sure we will have a lot more discussion with that. But the viewpoint is from a grants perspective, and we're saying that these are not really grants. So the city was never set up to do such grant monitoring. Now, I will say that state law doesn't require us to write contracts for these funds. We're still going to, because we want to make sure that the city gets an ROI, is monitoring performance, meets all insurance coverage needs, all of that. That will all be factored into the new programmatic way of doing business with this set of funding. So, and then I have Don here. Tracy DeSasia is out on vacation, so it's a shame she couldn't be here. But this audit was also done on FY23, which the process actually began in the fall of 2021. Right? Because you pass the budget and then you've got a lag. So the process really started in 2021. That was a long time ago. Since 2023, these funds, The city has made a lot of changes. There is more monitoring, there is more, I guess, I don't know if it's more site visits, but predominantly these funds are issued out of the human services portfolio. And they do site visit, human services portfolio. And they do site visits and grant monitoring. For the first time this year, we have a report that went to city council. Didn't exist before. So there has been a lot of progress made since these funds were appropriated. So better comparison in 2 years now would have been the 2025 funds that are being monitored very differently than in FY 2023. And I will say in 2027, this program will probably look very different.
Questions from members of the committee?
Is it appropriate for us to ask to see the legal opinion and the report to city council?
Actually, the report to city council is sitting on my desk and I meant to bring it down.
I don't need it right now. I'm just saying, I think it would frame what we're talking about here to understand what the legal opinion says and what the city council said in the way of an update.
The Virginia Code Section 15.2-953, which allows for gifts and donations or appropriations of money to certain organizations. It is entitled Donations to Charitable Institutions and Associations, Volunteer and Nonprofit Organizations, Chamber of Commerce, etc. So that is a section of code.
And is that what you refer to as the legal opinion?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then,
I'm sorry, that's not an opinion from the
No,
city attorney's office.
it's an email from the city attorney's.
it's a city.
Can I just have that date?
No, no, no.
Thank you.
So I think that part of it is that we were calling them grants when we really shouldn't have, honestly. It is just, we will be changing it in the budget document going forward to just call it partner agencies. And so these funds are usually provided to nonprofits or other organizations out in the community because it is a service that the city cannot provide, it's not able to provide, or it would have been cost prohibitive for the city to provide. So we use our nonprofit partners to provide those services out.
Do you recall what the budget was for the last year?
In 2024, I think it was about 6 million. 2025 is about 13 million.
It's gone up from 6
It has.
to 13.
It has gone up a lot, and the number of organizations, no increase to staffing. So that's the other. It's how we focus on these funds and how we monitor these funds. That part of it. Don would like to say something.
And just one thing to briefly note about that increase, included in some of that increase are these reserve lines that are often some of the larger amounts that are set aside for, say, the Positive Youth Development Fund or Health Equity Trust Fund. So they may not, that delta between those two numbers is not necessarily reflective of just singular small grants to individual organizations. They can also include these larger strategic investments the city is making in certain areas.
It's just important to note whether you call them grants or contracts, you have to monitor it, right? That's not going to take away the recommendation that we're giving away a certain amount of money, whether we grant it out or we contract it out or we do both. Monitoring is still necessary for us to ensure that the money is being used adequately, appropriately, and within whatever the agreements that we noted in the contract were. So that recommendation in the report, regardless of how the mechanism is, if we're contracting it, then it would be a contract management issue. This is a grant management issue.
Right, and that's definable, right? The monitoring needs to be defined as we go forward, now that we're not going to call them grants. I will tell you, in the other previous locality I worked in, we didn't call them grants. And we wrote a contract, and the performance monitoring was not as robust as here. Because again, this falls under the state code section of donations and sponsorships to charitable organizations.
The city had a number of responses to the recommendations. And none of them raised what you just described. There was a mention that there are charitable contributions as well as grants. But my question is, you laid out in some detail how the city planned to respond, the resources that were going to be needed, the time that was going to be required. How does that differ from what you just described? Is that just out the window?
No, it's not, because I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the grant dollar, or the fund that we're providing for services that we want to contract for are being met, and the ROI is there, and there is actual performance met. What I'm saying is, how deep that goes, I don't know yet, because we're redefining this whole program area. And we concurred with most of them. There's some were partial concurrence, because there are some things in here that we don't control. Non-D is a compilation of the mayor's priorities, but also city council's priorities. So oftentimes when we go through the budget process, city council will also add non-D organizations to the list. We have no control over that. That is their prerogative, that's their authority. If we are going to treat them as, say, grant application or program applications with a strict deadline, things like that, there will be organizations that do not get funded because they do not apply on time. That is just a fact with this program. And when they don't apply on time and we go through a budget process, it may be a big service that the city needs that has to be provided, and city council will put them back in. That does not go through the application process at the time. So that's what I'm saying. This is a compilation of mayoral priorities and council priorities in what we call the non-charitable organizations.
The city's response said that in order to implement the monitoring that the auditor's office had recommended, you would need 5 additional employees, 5 FTEs. Are you just talking about having lesser compliance, or are you still proposing to have them as additional employees monitoring it?
We don't know yet. We're in discussions with the mayor's office and some city council members about what this section of charitable organizations will look like. We don't know yet. I do believe that we have to have performance if we're handing out money, honestly, and we should be able to monitor that.
Bring most of the people on this committee.
Absolutely. I just don't know what it looks like right now and where the program's going to end up after our discussions with city council and the mayor's office.
Why do you think it's going to take 2 years to resolve?
Because I think we're right now about to propose a budget on March 27th. We don't have a whole lot of time to revamp it in wholesale. That's going to require a lot more discussion with city council. Because
what are now grants will be included in that budget?
I can't get ahead of the mayor's proposed budget right now.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
I just one important thing to add also, when it comes to managing the grants or the contracts, and we say it in the report, I just want to reiterate, you're hearing me say this a lot, in the next year, a risk-based approach is what we always recommend. Doesn't mean you manage everything, every penny, the riskier ones, higher value, harder to, sometimes you can do a quick desk review, sometimes you have to do a site visit. When you manage anything, I was discussing this with the director of procurement today, it's risk-based. You look at where your risk is, that's where you focus your limited resources, especially when those resources are. That's what the recommendation set essentially lays out.
Sure, absolutely.
So, starting with just make certain I have an understanding of this, that the write-up here, first thing that catches my eye is that the state code enables the city to partner with these organizations to strategically achieve its goals, and provide residents with additional services and programming not currently offered by city agencies. So that suggests to me that, the city can't fund all the charitable organizations in Richmond. That you set some priorities, the mayor and the city council, about the areas and who's going to be responsible for overseeing them, because they're strategic to the city's objectives. We're not just funding charitable organizations to fund charitable organizations. We have strategic objectives we're trying to meet. So those objectives, I'm just thinking out loud, have to be made clear. Whatever departments or agencies are responsible for administering them probably are the ones to make the proposals as to what agencies they need to partner with to achieve the objectives. So is that, and then that would influence the budget price process, because if I were responsible, I think, for an agency and my resources are limited and I wanted to partner with outside organizations, I would come to the administration and say, to achieve my objectives, here's what my department can do, and here's the outside organizations that need to help me do that. First of all, is that a correct way to think about it?
Yes, it is a correct way to think about it.
So it's
but-
not just people submitting, I like this charitable organization, so we want to fund it. It's got to hit some objective.
If we weren't on camera, I might answer you differently, but no, it really should be, there should be a set of priorities. There should be a set of priorities that city council and the mayor and the city has established. And based on those priorities should be how we set our budget. The things that the city departments cannot provide should be contracted out.
Yes.
Right, and so city council and the mayor will usually set the priorities on, we want to address housing, we want to address after school, we want to do this, we want to do that. Yes. Theoretically, that is what should happen within the organizations that we contract with for those services. It's not always as clean cut, because sometimes city council members may have a priority that comes up during the budget amendment time and want that funded. So that will get in. That is certainly their authority and their prerogative. The same with the mayor, certainly his prerogative to do so.
Okay, so I'm still holding, as a citizen, the view that it should be the city's priorities, not individual council members' priorities or the mayor's. But that's my citizens.
But there are consistent. Yeah.
So that also suggests to me that the work of the department and these independent agencies are working together to achieve some overall objective that gets measured. So when you're monitoring, you don't just monitor this not-for-profit organization, you monitor the department and the not-for-profits as to whether together they're achieving the objective.
You
Is
monitor
that
the
correct?
city's progress along with the outside, the partner organizations.
Yes,
So if
someone
it's a-
within the city is responsible for that.
So if it's homeless services, you will have nonprofit partners, but you also have some city divisions that also address homelessness. So the overall picture should be, how are we serving
Collectively, those
homeless
two.
priorities?
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay, so thank you, that helps clarify. One of the things that when it comes to monitoring, this is just a thought for you to consider. There are other people who fund nonprofits in the city that align with your priorities. And they too are monitoring performance of these organizations. So, for example, the United Way has a very elaborate process for allocating funds, seeing what their goals are, and then monitoring performance against the goals. So some sort of, I mean, it's just a thought, way of taking advantage of these other partners that you have that are funding the organizations. So the monitoring, you may not have to do it because someone else is doing it, but you have to see it, right? And maybe have some influence into the questions that get answered. It just strikes me that there's a set of interrelationships here. I'm glad you all are having the time to review it all, because there's a set of interrelationships that are essential if you all are to achieve your goals. So that's really what, and so it assumes that you have goals and expectations for outcomes in these areas. It's not just what the not-for-profits goals are, but what your goals are. And you're monitoring progress towards the goals. So that's a whole monitoring system for the city departments and programs that we're talking about there.
Correct.
Anyway, it's just to me, it's a much larger issue than 1 year's grants. The strategic impact is really critical, especially with the amount of funding that's been going up. I hope the selection process and the monitoring process is integrated with the departments and then the outside agencies that are otherwise funding these organizations. It's not clear to me that this is right now strategic enough. It doesn't appear strategic. It appears, but in fact, going out for it struck me as strange. If you know what you want by way of support, why do you go out for bids? I mean, why go out for proposals? I mean, it's like, I'm not the one who's going to get the job done. I don't need proposals, you know, and you go negotiate with the person who can get the job done. So it just doesn't make sense to me, the way it is currently described. I hope it's helpful to you, because I just want to support your notion of this, to have impact for the city. It needs a different approach than what I've read here.
Okay. We agree, which is why we're taking a step back. Again, we may have 1 more year of
Right.
doing what we're doing, but taking a step back, not just administration and mayor, but also with city council.
Yeah.
It has to be a collaborative
Absolutely.
revamp of this program.
It should be part of the strategic plan for the city.
Absolutely.
If it's housing, how does this fit in with the overall plan?
Yes, and it should all reach our priorities and how we. Totally agree with you. You're right on point. It is. We do need to have a lot of conversations with city council because they are partners in this.
I guess what I'm saying is I'm so glad you're doing this strategic overview, because this doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, it's a great audit, but it's an audit of the wrong system, in my view.
Yeah, no, they did a great job, because if we are administering these funds as grants, all of these rules apply. So again, we have to take a step back and say, what are we hoping to achieve with this money that we are putting out? Are we moving the needle?
Great, well, thank you.
Don,
Sorry
you wanna
for
say
that.
something?
Any further questions or comments?
Comments.
Oh, well, I would say mostly just affirm what Don shared there, and I think Sabrina, you already did that. A couple pieces just to reaffirm. I think a lot of what you just laid out is already in place in terms of the guideline document laying out some of those sort of strategies and priorities. Now, granted, that can evolve a lot between September, when that document needs to be finalized, and May, when a budget needs to be adopted. And there's an increasing number of subject matter experts from across the city, at least 2 of whom are all reviewing and scoring each application, and now participating in site visits of those organizations within that same within those same categories. And then to an earlier point that Don made about working with our partner organizations and partner funding entities in the city. My sense, I came in sort of in the middle of the year being audited, but my sense is that was to a great degree already happening. And part of our problem is that there wasn't a great job of consistently documenting what outside coordination and collaboration and information we're using to inform those decisions beyond the individual score that was provided. And I think we have an opportunity to do a better job of saying, here are all the data points that we're using to inform these decisions, and making sure we're consistent with that and then documenting that. I think that will go a long way.
Okay. So again, from when and I know we had to look at the closed out projects for data. A lot of changes have already been made since then. And that's what I'm saying. The report never existed till this year. So there have been a lot of incremental changes. Again, it's time to sit back and really look at what we're doing.
It's like a partnership. Okay, that's great.
So in our quarterly process, we follow up on open recommendations. That's when we verify, at the end of an audit, everyone tells us what they've done, what they plan on doing, agree, disagree. And every quarter, we look at it, we test it, we verify that something is done, something is processed, something was concluded, or, that's when we do that work to say, okay, these things have been implemented.
Sometimes we say, it doesn't make sense anymore to pursue this recommendation.
Right, and we sometimes
we
we
do that.
remove them because we say, okay, this whole process has changed, 4 of them can be removed if we go to a completely different process. But the monitoring is not changing. I'm not taking that recommendation away.
So back to one of your points about why do we go out for a bid? We will issue an RFP or something if we don't have an organization that we, if you notice in the charitable organization section, they're listed. That means that that is the organization that will get the money. Now we do an application process in the beginning to make sure they're reaching the thresholds that we're looking for and how much to provide with them per unit cost wise. But that's why they're listed out. Once they're listed out in the budget and council has approved it by name, it's a straight contract, then there is no more bid. There's no more RFP.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, we need to segue into the follow-up report from Leanne.
Thank you guys. So now I'm going to go over the fiscal year 2025 second quarter follow-up recommendations. As part of our review, we interviewed management personnel and staff, reviewed demonstrations of new systems, and reviewed documentation submitted by the department to support the steps that they've implemented to close these recommendations. These are the 8 departments that closed recommendations during the second quarter. We'd like to thank the administration and the staff for their work in implementing these recommendations. So at the start of the second quarter of fiscal year 2025, so October 24 through December 24, there were 118 total recommendations assigned to 17 city departments. Throughout that quarter, we added an additional 38 recommendations, with 3 of those closed at the time that audit report was issued. Since our last meeting, we have continued to work with departments to keep closing recommendations. This quarter under review, we closed 13 recommendations and removed 2. Some of the recommendations that were closed related to the implementation of a new system, implementation of best practices, and compliance with city policies. There were 2 high priority, 4 medium priority, and 7 low priority recommendations closed. 2 recommendations were removed due to no longer being applicable. And at the end of our review, 141 recommendations remained open, and of these, 30 are high priority. Again, this is an ongoing process, and state departments are working with us. And even if they don't have something closed this quarter, we're still working around. It's a continuous process. So, any questions?
Okay, again, any comment from the administration on this?
No, I just want to say we appreciate the auditor's office, always, checking in with us, continue to make the improvements. Some of this is system related in terms of IT changes that will take longer periods. Is Scott in the room?
Yes.
Okay, so let me also introduce you. Sorry, I didn't even see you sitting there. Scott Morris, he is our new director of public utilities. And he, we've gone over a lot of this stuff, and he's got, a progression outline for closing out some of these recommendations. So utilities and finance are 2 of the biggest areas of continuous recommendations.
And one of their initiatives right now is hiring on a staff member that's going to be going over compliance-related issues associated with federal and state requirements, but also internal audit recommendations. That person should be coming on board within the next month. And then they'll be totally focused on both regulatory compliance, but also adjusting some of these internal audits and trying to streamline some of the recommendations and also incorporate them in more timely fashion. So hopefully I'm not going to be on the top of the list in the near future. I'll be on the bottom.
Well, to be fair, you guys did a great job since I started moving down, and we did the warehouse audits, and then it was, I think 26 of them. So, yeah.
I'll always pay particular attention to the audit recommendations that are open after the date they were supposed to be closed. I think that's really involved. And in the attaboy category, at the end of last fiscal year, there were 134 that fell in that category. This one, there were 190. So that's moving.
Like to get them to 0.
That'd be
That'd
great.
be great. Yeah. We can do that under the next administration.
Please get them to 0. It's too much work.
Trying. Some of it is system limitation.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments on this?
Just one question. on page 6, the first one refers to centralized management, grant management. Is that different from what we're talking about? Is this recommendation covering the same subject as the report we just discussed?
This one is much broader. This is not just the charitable organizations that we fund out of our budgets. This is grant applications
Yes.
that we may submit to NIH, wherever. And it needs to be centralized. So budget office is looking for a grant manager of high caliber, if you know of any, take them. But want to centralize the grant process throughout the city so we don't have the police department applying for the same grant.
Yes.
And also to make sure that we are monitoring grants properly. Yeah,
Broader.
much broader.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the IG update. I don't think that Jim is here. Mr. Johnson, is that you?
Yes, Fred Johnson, the Deputy Inspector General, still doing his update. Over the last quarter, we have 20 open cases. We did not close any substantiated cases this quarter, but we did have 4 unsubstantiated cases. We received 5 new cases, and 2 of the cases are currently, we're doing joint investigations with the federal authorities.
I just saw in the newspaper that there was a report of an indictment.
Yes, sir.
By the Commonwealth's attorney. That grew out of one of your investigations.
That is one of our investigations. We're still currently working with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office within that investigation, so we have not issued a report as of yet.
Any question of the Inspector General's office? Okay, Riyadh. Audit plan specs.
All right, so for the audit plan update. All right, so before we go into the audit plan update, I just want to take a second to kind of go over the key stages of an audit. I constantly tell you guys what stage we're in. I've never actually defined what any of that means. So the slide here, we have the 3 key stages of an audit are the planning stage, the fieldwork stage, and the reporting stage. So when I noted an audit is in the planning stage, that's essentially when we're doing a risk assessment of the process, the program, the contract, whatever we may be auditing, and we're determining where the risk is, where we should really focus our attention. Doesn't mean we're going to audit an entire process or program. We just, as we assess the risk, we say, okay, we should really focus in on here, here, and here. And then in the planning phase, we develop an audit plan that determines what testing procedures we want to do to test that risk and determine if there's a risk that does exist, was it compromised in any way to lead to some sort of activity? We figure that out in the planning phase. In the fieldwork phase, when we dive deep into the plan and we start looking at transactions, documents, controls, invoices, and determine, really the testing of what we're looking at. That's where a lot of the meat of the auditing work goes in. Although most of the work, I'd say planning is super important as we nail it. Fieldwork is just kind of laying out the plan and actually doing it. That's also when we talk to vendors, talk to staff, and kind of, understand why things are happening the way they're happening. And then finally, the reporting phase sounds pretty self-explanatory, but it isn't as self-explanatory as it sounds. And the reporting phase is a lot of the QC, the quality control work that we do for an audit occurs at that phase. The senior auditors are completed their work. And, essentially really Brandon and Yolanda get just overburdened with the amount of stuff to review and make sure it's right, it's accurate, conclusions are correct, everything is what it seems, no mistakes were made. We have to go back and double check, double work. At that point, we develop findings, recommendations, and conclusions, and we sit with management to go over those findings, recommendations, the final findings and recommendations, and we develop a report. We draft that first report, and it could take up to 30 days before it gets finalized, right? The whole drafting process takes some time. There's a 10-day response period, and so from the minute we draft the report to the date it goes out, there's a long, probably 30-day period before it can go final, assuming that there's nothing that changes in a meeting with management, any new evidence, or whatnot. So that kind of goes over those key 3 stages of an audit. Now, for the audit plan, this first slide here, we have the audits that are in progress and the audits that have been completed this year. We lead up with the streetlight maintenance audit. Obviously, we issued that last audit committee. We went over that. That was phase 1. It was about, some of the expenditures, billings that occurred in the city. Phase 2 is really focused in on two things. One being timeliness of the repairs of the streetlights. They're being repaired in a timely fashion. Do the metrics make sense, et cetera? But the bigger part of phase 2 is that we're trying to determine the accuracy of the city's bills. We want to be sure that we're being billed accurately. That's going to take a little more time as we're working through that. That's what phase 2 incorporates. We have the warehousing audit and inventory management. Again, that was requested by administration. We do that audit. It turned out to be a very valuable audit, I think, for the city. We've completed 2 phases. We've decided we're going to complete the whole thing in the 3rd phase. The audits the warehouses that are left are very small. So we're issuing our final report. It's in the reporting phase now. One of our senior auditors, Tony Noel, is drafting it. So we're hoping to get that out, within the next month, determining on if any other additional work needs to be done, and it will incorporate all of the final warehouses and the city's overall process. Non-departmental, that's the next one we've completed. The purchasing card audit, that's currently, it says field work. It really is at the end of field work, beginning of reporting. I know Yolanda's been doing a lot of quality control work on that audit now. It should be, this should be completed within the next month to 2 months timeframe. We have a lot of audits and reporting, so they're all lined up, and there's only so many of us. And that audit, there's some significant findings that by the next audit committee, we should be able to share that audit and our conclusions there. The Richmond Retirement System audit, that one, I got the draft report of that audit actually today. So I'm going to be working on that this week. And in the next few weeks, hopefully we'll get that over to the Richmond Retirement System, and probably in a couple of weeks, that audit will be finalized once the response period is ended. We have a fleet fuel usage audit. Again, that's also in the reporting stage. Senior Auditor Chastity Comer is currently working on the draft of that report. Again, as you can see, there are a lot of reports in the hopper. So we can only work through, one at a time as it comes through me. So that audit, again, another probably maybe 2 months, we should have something out finalized as we kind of wrap up the QC and the final report. And then we have the Top Guard audit of the security guard contract. Again, we're down 3 staff members. So that one has not moved significantly. We're trying to move it as we can. We're hoping getting a new staff in here will keep some of these audits moving. But right now it's crawling. Leanna is the one working on that, and she's doing the quarterly follow-up, which takes quite a bit of her time. Cybersecurity network vulnerability assessment. Our audit manager, Rob Brooks, is handling that. I think he spoke with the DP director today, and he spoke with IT. We're going to look at the gasworks system and do our cybersecurity assessment of that. We're kind of working through exactly what's going to be established, but we're in the planning phase of that audit, and we're hoping to get that kicked off very soon. We've done the APA earlier this year. Follow-up, as you know, 3 out of 4 reports have been issued, and we've completed our external audit assistance to CLA. Now, this list here is what changes constantly. It's the audits we plan to initiate throughout the rest of the fiscal year through June 30th. First one that we plan on doing is the personal property tax assessment and collections and billing audit. And now that our VAP has been used, we want to assess, controls in place and how it's working. Follow up to our audit, I think that was done last year. And so we plan on starting that in April, is the kind of plan now. Of course, the staffing is available. You can start stuff sooner or later, et cetera. Our continuous audit and risk assessment, I'm currently doing the city's risk assessment myself. The continuous auditing kind of rolls into that together. As soon as Rob rolls off of the retirement audit in a couple of weeks, he's going to hit the continuous audit. That's our data analytics audit that we do every year that we're kind of revamping as we move forward. Now, there's a couple there, the overtime compliance audit, and then there's a miscellaneous vendor audit that we want to start. The miscellaneous vendor, I think I'm going to push that back. After talking to CLA over the weekend, they did some testing, as he said, on the miscellaneous vendor process, so it's less risky at this point. So I can make time for some additional requests that have come in. That audit will likely be, at this point, moved to next year. And then the fire emergency services payroll audit. I wanted to start that this year. Sabrina had made a request for me to look at something payroll related in the public service departments. And so that will be incorporated or done instead of this audit as we kind of establish, it might be the same audit, but in a more limited scope of all public services payroll. But there's a request that we're looking at now to fulfilling for administration related to that audit. And finally, there's a new audit that was added on, a special project from City Council, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Essentially, it's to determine the city's compliance with Code Section 12-46, which covers how the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is funded. We're going to take a look at that. We are going to start that fairly soon. And so that has been added to the plan to make room. Again, miscellaneous vendor audit might roll out. And in this last slide, we have the ones that are just being removed from the plan or rescheduled to a different time frame. They're all kept in the hopper in our G drive, essentially what we want to do. But when we can work them in, we try. There's an Affordable Housing Trust Fund expenditures audit that we wanted to kick off this year. It was on the plan last year. We moved it to this year. Really, it doesn't make sense to do it until there are a significant amount of expenditures through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So once there are that, then we can do that audit to make it, actually see how the expenditures were utilized. There's an American Rescue Plan audit that we might reschedule to next year, as well as a human resources salary, kind of look at how constitutional officers request salary adjustments and they're approved in HR. That's going to be removed or moved to next year. And there's an audit that we plan to do of ACOM, the city's consultant engineer. But that audit, it's gonna take a lot of time. And down 3 staff members, we're not gonna have time to start that this year. We may start that in the next fiscal year, given what the results of our risk assessment are. But at this point, we have to perform the risk assessment. I've been talking with Sabrina and the mayor and council members, making requests for audits, and we're determining what makes sense to do as we move forward. So at this point, I'm not sure what will be on the audit plan next year, but there will be a significant amount of audits in progress, as we see from this slide that we have planned. And there's very limited space for new audits. So we'll have to make a very specific determination on what makes sense next year. Any questions?
Questions, anyone on the committee? The audit committee will need to approve the final plans for the next fiscal year at the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to the last item on the agenda. This spring marks 9 years and 3 terms. And Don Coles and I have been on the audit committee, and we rotate off. We'll be sailing into the sunset. Don, did you want to offer any last minute thoughts or comments?
I do. I want to, it's basically a thank you. Always a thank you to the professionalism of the internal audit staff. It's always been a pleasure to work with them over the years. And then it's been a particular a treat for me. I don't know how else I would get to know as many people in many departments of this city that work so hard for all of us. And it's been an honor to meet them and to appreciate the work that you all do. It's hard work, and you get a lot of complaints and all of that sort of thing, but you accept it as part of the job to meet our citizens' requests. And thank you all so much for all you've done. You inspire me. So I'm honored to have been a part of this committee, but mainly to have met you all. So thanks.
And I'd like to offer much the same in way of comments. I'd like to thank City Council for putting me on the audit committee to begin with, and to the members of the committee for the support and assistance you've given me as I've been chairman. And particularly to Riyadh and Brett and Yolanda and the whole staff for their good work. I've seen 3 city auditors, all of whom are professional, good people, all of whom have very different styles from one another. And I think they've all done good work for the city, and I know it will continue. Also want to let you know that City Council has already appointed replacements for Don and me on the committee, and they will be on board by the next meeting. One you will know well, and that's Kristen Nye, who is a former City Council member and president. She was on the audit committee as a member of City Council for a number of years, and she has now agreed to come back on as a citizen member. So she'll be well served by having her. The second is a partner at Hutton Andrews Kurth, with whom I worked for many years, named George Sibley, goes by Trey. Excellent lawyer, and he'll make a great addition to the committee. So you'll be very well served by the new folks that are coming on. The last piece of business is to replace me. And Lee, I think you have a nomination to make.
I'm going to nominate Sam Bemis to be the next chair of the audit committee.
Well, that's a real surprise. Thank you. Are there any further nominations? Hearing no further nominations, all in favor of Mr. Bemis as chairman, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Sam, thank you for agreeing to serve. And I'm going to symbolically hand over the gavel to you to adjourn the meeting. It's yours from now on.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'll just say quickly, I feel the same way that the rest of the committee feels about the importance of this work and the caliber of the people that we're working with here. It's been a privilege to serve consecutively under the guidance of Roger Bobet and our retiring chairman. And it's been a pleasure to be on the committee with Don and Lee. So it's been fun for me. It's a daunting set of shoes to have to fill. And I say set because I think Roger's feet are bigger than yours. But that is, the size of his shoes are no greater than anyway, I'm pleased. I'm excited about the opportunity. I feel like the city is in a good place now where it's kind of on a roll. I've lived here my whole life, and I don't know that there's been a time when I've been in Richmond when there's been more sort of vigor and promise. I'm enthused about the current mayor and city council and the current auditor and audit committee. I'll do what I can do to support filling out the empty spots on the audit committee because I think this is a net profit maker for the city. And so I'm excited, and thank you, Joe, and thank all of you. And I'm excited about what's to come.
Great.
And I guess I get to adjourn the meeting.
I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of City Council for your service here. It is greatly appreciated and certainly look forward to the continued work. Certainly Riyadh and his entire staff have been just incredible in these processes. And so we look forward to continuing the reviews that allow us to move our city to the place that we all would want it to be. So I just want to say thank you. And certainly all of the city staff that here can't see everybody, but thank you all. Thank you.
Anything else to come before the committee? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Nice to meet you.